Good day, everyone. Today, we will be discussing an important aspect of archival service, which is the access and uses of archives, and I will be discussing the first part of the topic. So, these are the objectives of my report. First is to determine access and uses of archives, understand the importance and implications of access and uses of archives, explore the best practices and strategies, as well as the various challenges and opportunities when it comes to access and uses of archives. Access and use of archives is a crucial step that enables people to explore the rich history and cultural heritage stored in archives. And the main objective of making archives available is to preserve the past for future generations and provide the public with access to valuable information. So, in the past, access to archives was limited to a select few individuals who were privileged enough to be permitted into the reference room. And this was because archives were considered treasures. So they were held locked in vaults and protected by archivists who acted as custodians on behalf of the government or other organizations. So the idea was to keep the archives safe from harm. However, as times have changed, and so has the approach to making archives available. Today, archivists are more open to inviting the public in and providing them with access to archives. So they have recognized the importance of making archives available for use in order to promote a better understanding of our cultural heritage and preserve the memories of our past for future generations. So one great example of this is the National Archives in Washington, D.C., where the public can view original copies of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. Another example is the British Library in London, where visitors can view original manuscripts and books that date back centuries. The Philippines has a rich collection of archives that date back centuries, and these archives include important documents, photographs, maps, and other materials that provide insight into the country's history and heritage. However, for a long time, access to these archives was limited to only a select few researchers and historians. In recent years, however, the Philippine government has taken steps to make these archives more accessible to the public. So, for instance, the recently established Baybayin Museum in the National Museum of the Philippines showcases the Philippines' ancient writing system known as Baybayin. The museum houses original Baybayin artifacts as well as reproductions and interactive displays that provide visitors with a deeper understanding of this important part of the Philippine heritage. So by making these archives available to the public, the Philippine government is helping to preserve the country's cultural heritage and make it accessible to the future generations. And these examples show how important it is to make archives available to the public. And by doing so, archives can provide insight into the past and foster a deeper understanding of the world around us. So the role of archives and archivists in the digital age has also become increasingly important as more and more information becomes available through the internet. Archivists are tasked with preserving and protecting not only the physical, tangible items, but also ensuring that this information is made available to a wider and more diverse research community. And this requires a delicate balance between making archives accessible and protecting individual privacy. So this means that archivists are now responsible for balancing access and privacy. In order to accomplish these goals, archivists must take advantage of new technologies to disseminate information and make archives more widely available. This includes leveraging electronic gateways to share information and making use of digital tools to preserve and manage archives in a way that is both efficient and effective. Additionally, archivists must also be mindful of the importance of preserving cultural heritage and documenting the historical memory of the state. So, to give an example, the National Library of the Philippines, as the country's premier archives institution, has been making efforts to digitize its collections and make them available through online and its websites and to other platforms. So, this will allow the researchers and the general public to access a wealth of information and resources from the comfort of their homes. So to understand more about how archives can be made accessible to the public, including equal access, the reference environment, documenting reference service, and etc., let's first start by exploring the importance of equal access to archives. So imagine this scenario. You're a historian or a researcher, and you've always been curious about the Philippines' rich history and heritage. and you're excited to visit the National Archives to do some research and learn more about the country's past. However, when you arrive, you're told that you can enter because you're not a citizen of the Philippines. So how would you feel? So normally, you would feel frustrated, right? So this is what equal access means. It means that anyone, regardless of their citizenship or residency, should be able to access the archives if the materials are not restricted. So equal access to archives is the idea that anyone should be able to use the holdings of an archive as long as the materials are not restricted and the facility is supported by public funds for public use. However, the reality is that the access to archives can vary greatly depending on the institution and the country. So in some places, you may need to provide identification, register as a researcher, or even apply in writing months in advance to visit the archives. In some cases, access may only be granted to citizens of the country while foreigners are not allowed. The archivist plays a crucial role in promoting equal access by striving for greater openness and supporting wider access to archives whenever possible. However, the cultural and political framework of the institution also plays a big part in shaping reference policies. So the term user or researcher is now being replaced with client or customer to reflect the idea of the archivist as a steward and advisor rather than a gatekeeper. So to elaborate the idea further, let me give an example. So in the Philippines, most archives require researchers to register and provide identification before being admitted to the reference room. And this is simply because it is a measure of security and control over the holdings. Similarly, the university archives at UP Diliman have a policy for the use of their archives. Members of the UP system, including students, faculty, and employees, have full access to the archives, while non-members of the university, including graduate students from other schools, government researchers, and private researchers, may use the library's resources within the premises, subject to rules and regulations. And this policy ensures that the archives are accessible to a wide range of individuals while maintaining proper regulations. And it is important to remember that the ultimate goal of preserving archives is to make them available to anyone who has a right to access them now and in the future. And by balancing current demands with the rights of future generations, the archivist can ensure equal access to the archives. So an equal access in here means supporting current demands while still respecting the rights of future generations. So now let's move on to the conditions for access to archives. So when it comes to accessing archival materials, there are few things to consider. First and foremost, the archivist has to decide who they want to allow into the reference room and under what conditions. So yung reference room, it is a special place in a library or archives where people can go to look and study important documents or items under the supervision of an archivist and subject to rules and conditions set by the repository to ensure the preservation and protection of the archives. So as an example of these conditions is, will researchers be allowed to bring in their own computers and take photos of the archives with their digital cameras? So this condition may seem like small details, but they can have a big impact on the overall experience of using the archives. Another important factor is the type of archives being preserved. So for example, a university's special collections department may have a collection of delicate and fragile medieval scrolls. So in this case, the archivist will need to provide detailed instructions to users on how to handle these items. So a repository is a place where archives or historical records are stored and maintained. And a repository preserving digital archives will need to make sure that the necessary technology is available for public access, including establishing policies on how people can access and reproduce digital archives. Ultimately, the conditions of access will depend on the type of repository and its intended audience. So some archives, like corporate archives, may only be accessible to people within the organization, while others, like community archives, may be open to everyone, from academic researchers to school children. And it's up to the archivist to strike the right balance between ensuring the preservation of the archives and making them accessible to those who need them. Now, let us proceed to the reference and personal privacy. So, as an archivist, it is important to always keep in mind the privacy rights of the individuals involved in the archives. So, this includes both the people who created the archives and those who are named in them. And when it comes to making decisions about access to certain parts of the collection, it is essential to approach this matter carefully and with respect for any legal or policy requirements, as well as the wishes of the donors and other parties. So these conditions of use must be clearly documented in the finding aids, and it is the responsibility of the archivist to ensure that these conditions are not disregarded. Aside from the privacy of individuals associated with the holdings, the archivist must also take into consideration the privacy rights of the people who are using the archives for research. People come to the archives for various reasons, such as tracing their family history or conducting legal research. And as an archivist, it is important to respect each request for archival information and protect the individual researcher's right to privacy. So, this means that interviews with researchers may need to be held in private offices where others cannot overhear personal conversations. And if a researcher is given permission to view confidential documents, they may need to carry out their research in a secure and private location. As an example, in the Philippines, many archive repositories contain important historical records, such as government records, family papers, and other personal documents. So these archives may contain sensitive information that could impact the privacy of individuals and their families. The archivist must be cautious in handling such information and ensure that it is only made accessible to authorized individuals. Balancing potentially conflicting research demands is also a crucial role of the archivist. The archives in the Philippines holds a wealth of historical information that is valuable for family history research, legal research, and more. Sometimes, researchers with opposing interests may come to the archive repository to access the same records. So for instance, two families may be in dispute over the ownership of a piece of land, and both may access the land title records in the archives to support their claims. And in this case, the archivist must provide the same level of assistance to both parties while at the same time maintaining impartiality and protecting the privacy of either party. Next is the access and cultural concerns. So archivists plays a crucial role in ensuring that the records and archives in their care are accessible to all members of the community. And in a multicultural society like the Philippines, it's important for archivists to be aware of the different languages and cultural backgrounds of the community they serve. So they must consider how to provide access to archives that may be in a language that's not used by everyone. So for example, in the Philippines, there are many different languages spoken, such as Tagalog, Cebuano, Ilocano, Waray, and others. And if an archive repository in the Philippines hold records in one of these languages, the archivist needs to consider how to make these records accessible to members of the community who may not speak that language. And this could involve translation or providing language support in the reference room. In such cases, the archivist must think of alternative ways to make the archives accessible to everyone. So the Philippines is a country with a rich cultural heritage with many different cultural groups, such as the indigenous tribes, Chinese, Spanish, and American communities. The archive repository must ensure that the holdings in its care represent these different cultural groups. And this involves regularly reviewing acquisition plans and strategies to ensure that the archives represent the diverse cultures of the community. Additionally, the archivist must be aware of cultural concerns, such as how to handle records and archives that may be sensitive to certain members of the community. And they must ensure that they are respecting the value of social inclusion while making sure that the archives are accessible to everyone who needs them. So for example, the archivist at the National Archives of the Philippines must be aware of cultural concerns when dealing with records related to the country's history of colonization and revolution. So some records may be sensitive to some indigenous communities or communities that have suffered under colonization, and the archivist must take care to handle them with sensitivity and respect. The archivist must also ensure that the archives are accessible to all members of the community, including those who may have limited access to resources, such as those living in rural areas. And this might involve creating partnerships with community organizations, like providing translation services or offering access to digital copies of the archives. So by doing this, the archivist can ensure that the history of the Philippines is preserved for future generations while also promoting social inclusion and making the archives accessible to all. So next is establishing reference and access policies. As an archivist, it's important to establish clear policies regarding reference and access services to make sure everyone can access and make use of the valuable information stored in the archives. So these policies help set the expectations for both the institution and its users. So for example, let's say you're part of a local archive in the Philippines focused on preserving the history and culture of your community. So your reference and access policy should outline the guidelines for how visitors can access and review the materials in your repository, such as operating hours or any restrictions on the use of certain items and procedures for requesting information about or special access to rare or fragile items. So having these policies in place not only helps ensure the preservation and protection of your archives, but also makes the research process smoother and more efficient for everyone involved. And by setting clear rules and expectations, everyone knows what to expect and can focus on the amazing stories and insights waiting to be discovered within the archives. So next is the reference environment. So imagine walking into a library and not finding a comfortable chair to sit on, or not having access to a simple dictionary to look up a word you're unfamiliar with. So this is not what a good reference environment should be like. As an archivist, it is important to create a supportive environment for users who come to the reference room to access information. So to create a supportive reference environment, it is essential to invest in resources like technology, equipment, supplies, and publications. So the basics like comfortable chairs, proper lighting and heating, and access to refreshments are non-negotiable. And you should also have easy-to-use finding aids and standard reference materials such as local histories, dictionaries, encyclopedias, atlases, and relevant periodicals or journals. In a digital age, access to the internet is crucial in the reference room. The archivist should also consider security issues and the cost of acquiring, maintaining, and upgrading equipment. The archivist should also have policies in place for how to handle misuse of technology or for those users who overstay their welcome at the reference room computers. So for archives that collect microfilm, sound recordings, videotapes, or other media-dependent materials, the archivist should consider how users will access these materials and invest in the necessary equipment such as microfilm readers and printers, tape players, video machines, or DVD players. So the archivist should also have policies in place for photocopy, including what can and cannot be copied, the fees that would be charged, and how and when copies will be made. So to do this, the institution should first have a photocopier. For example, in the Philippines, many archives have been established to preserve the country's rich cultural heritage, such as the National Archives of the Philippines, the National Library of the Philippines, National Museum, and the Ayala Museum. So these institutions try to provide a supportive reference environment for researchers, students, and anyone interested in learning about the Philippines and its history and culture, ensuring that users have a seamless and enjoyable experience in the reference room. So as you can see, a supportive reference environment is not just a luxury, but a necessity for users and institutions alike. A supportive reference environment not only benefits users, but also enhances the reputation of the institution. And by prioritizing the creation of a supportive reference environment, archivists can ensure that users have the best possible experience and that the institution continues to maintain its excellence. So let us now move on to the individual support. So imagine you're visiting the National Archives of the Philippines, eager to learn more about our country's history and culture. And you walk into the archive center and meet the archivist who is there to help you understand the collections and services they offer. So the archivist's role is important in ensuring that you have a great experience. They need to know everything about the National Archives, from the different materials they hold to how to use the reference tools and finding aids. The reference archivist needs to be comfortable explaining things multiple times and should be as interested in the visitor as they are in their collections. They need to know their institution inside and out and understand the different types of visitors who come to the archives. And most importantly, they need to be interested in you and your questions. Now, what if you're not the only one asking the same questions over and over again? So that's where reference guides and hands-out come in handy. National Archives can create guides that answer basic or frequently asked questions, or even produce introductory videos that explain the nature of the facility and its holdings and services. This way, the visitors can have a better understanding of what to expect before even entering the library. So investing in quality reference aids may require time and effort, but it can save a lot of time in the long run for both the visitor and the reference archivist. So the next time you visit the National Archives of the Philippines, remember that the archivist is there to make your experience memorable and educational. They want you to understand our country's history and culture just as much as you do. And with their help, you'll be able to dive deeper into the archives and uncover the stories that make the Philippines unique. So now, let us move on to the reference interviews. So in the world of archives and historical research, the reference interview plays a crucial role in assisting researchers and in identifying their specific interests and directing them towards appropriate materials. So this interaction between the researcher and the archivist offers a unique opportunity for both parties to gain valuable insights and information. So in the Philippines, the National Historical Commission serves as an example of how reference interviews can aid in the archival research process. Imagine being a local citizen who wants to learn more about your family's history and visiting the National Historical Commission for the first time. So the reference archivist there can conduct a reference interview with you to understand what you're looking for and guide you in your research journey. So it is important to note that while reference interviews may not replace the extensive research that scholars may have already undertaken, they can still provide valuable information on recent changes in holdings and services. On the other hand, for those new to archival research, a reference interview can provide a foundation for their research journey and offer support and guidance. So the reference provides opportunity for researchers to receive personalized attention from the archivist, allowing for a more effective and efficient research experience. Whether a seasoned academic researcher or a local citizen exploring their family history, the reference interview offers a valuable resource for those seeking to deepen their understanding of archival holdings and services. So if you're interested in exploring your country's history or looking for guidance on your research journey, the reference interview is a great place to start. So lastly, documenting reference services. The importance of documenting reference services cannot be overstated. Every interaction between the archivist and the researcher must be recorded in some way. To keep track of visitors and their interests, researchers are required to sign a register each time they visit the institution. So this not only serves as proof of their presence, but also provides valuable insights into the types of research being conducted within the institution. So imagine this scenario. A historian from the University of the Philippines visits the archives to research the history of the country's independence movement. So by signing the register, these historians visit and the topic of their research become part of the archive's records. And in the event of an emergency, such as a fire or earthquake, the register can help identify all individuals in the facility and ensure their safety. Moreover, all reference inquiries made via email or telephone must also be documented. This includes the time and date of contact and the nature of the research question and the name and contact details of the person making the inquiry. The archivist's written response to the inquiry should also be indexed as part of the archive's own records. And these statistics are crucial in illustrating the level and nature of services provided and can help secure increased budgets from resource allocators. So in conclusion, the role of an archivist is crucial in preserving the rich cultural heritage and history of a country. By documenting every interaction and reference service, they show the impact of the researcher's work and the value of the archives they protect. In short, archivists play an essential role in ensuring that the past is never lost and that the wealth of information contained in the archives can be shared with the world. So they are the guardians of our cultural heritage, and their work is vital to the preservation of our history and the education of future generations. So these are all for my report, and here are my references. Thank you for taking the time to understand the importance of the first part of the topic, access and uses of archives.